Hello and welcome to the Falcom Fancast. I hope you're all having a wonderful summer. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. We had an interesting conversation recently with a friend about Rean Schwarzer, and I thought it would be interesting to include it in a separate episode. This episode is going to assume that you have played the games up to Century, unless you don't mind being spoiled, but you have been warned. I hope you all enjoyed this one, so let's get to it.
I was spoiled yet again because for some reason I just cannot stop myself from going onto Kiseki threads on my anime list.
And what happened? What did you see?
So supposedly, I was trying to avoid spoilers, so I may have read this wrong in an attempt to not read it correctly. But Elisa's father is alive and he's let's just say a G-man. G-man.
I am afraid that it is true.
Ah, I see!
And also, guess what about Elisa and Rean's dads? Since you know it, well, you know.
They know each other.
They work together.
Of course!
So, yeah.
I kind of knew that, actually.
Okay.
Like, from being spoiled again.
Okay. Well, now you know why, I guess if you've seen the artwork of the cover, like Elisa looks, what do you call it, miserable because of things that happened.
Well, at least it helps establish more of Elisa as canon girl.
Yeah, so I'm glad about that because she's gonna have a role, which is nice. Oh, and I hope
no one can say that Emma is canon girl.
Yeah,
because Emma is best girl because she's important to the plot. Well, guess what? Now Elisa is too. Can't use that argument anymore.
Yeah. Also, well, you know, just the way it's been presented since the beginning, you have to be in denial to say that Emma is. Are hoping that Estelle and Joshua are basically showing how it's done, I guess.
That.
You know what sucks? Actually, sorry, but speaking of that, before I forget. I bet that Class 7, the new and old Class 7, are again gonna be useless and be saved by all the other protagonists.
Oh, you mean sort of like how, what do you call it? The special section or something was...
So special support section, yeah. That's
special support section, that's what it was.
Yeah. Because Lloyd is gonna be there too. Ellie... This is a big fan service.
So Class 7 is going to be doubly useless. They're going to be useless with the special support section around, and then they're going to be even doubly useless because then Estelle and Joshua are going to bail them out.
Exactly, because one thing we hate with my French friends about Century is, I'm not gonna spoil too much, but even then, the old Class 7 is useless as hell. And they always get their butts saved by other people. And Rean is still as useless as ever. So it's really annoying to get saved all the time, I think. And it feels like you cannot do anything. While Estelle and Joshua and the SSS were actually, you know, they were saved a few times, but it didn't feel the same, you know. They were actually able to deal with things, I guess, on their own. So I hear a lot of people saying that now Class 7, old and new, are gonna be even more useless.
That actually reminds me of So again, because I cannot help myself from going into Kiseki threads on my anime list, that reminds me of a compelling argument for, you know how I really do not like Rean. I think he's boring. I think the other protagonists in the series have much more character than he does, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. We've talked about this.
Well, you haven't met Lloyd.
But someone made a compelling argument to me on why all my grievances with Rean makes him a compelling character. And here was the argument. I'm going to be paraphrasing this, shortening this, because I cannot remember everything, but basically, Rean is a generic light novel protagonist.
And shonen.
He has a super special mode. He's a special snowflake. He has a superpower mode that makes him near invincible. He has a giant robot that it's pretty much exclusive to him. He has females swooning over him. He has a special lineage, and he has a special lineage and whatnot. He has people that love and adore him from all walks of life, and he's completely charismatic, and everyone wants to be his friend, and he's able to win people over. He is a generic light novel / shonen anime protagonist. But unfortunately, he is a light novel protagonist in a world where that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
He's constantly getting his posterior handed to him. He constantly requires the help of others who are more capable than him because they have more experience than him.
That goes for all of them, though, but yeah, for Rean as well.
For Rean as well.
He cannot control his emotions. That's one thing.
He cannot control his emotions because of his idealistic nature.
Yeah.
And again, because this is the world of Kiseki we're talking about, just because he's special doesn't mean that there are people who aren't special as well. There are people who have the same power as he does, and again, they have more experience with these powers.
Yep.
And again, because of his idealistic nature and the way the world of Kiseki works, his ideals are... He's being crushed under his own ideals and the awful nature of the world.
Honestly, okay, I do like Rean, and that's one thing I actually like about it is how miserable he gets. I know it's weird to say that, but I actually like it because I don't know, it just feels, you know, how what you just said basically, how he gets completely destroyed, and because his idealistic nature doesn't... I'm trying to focus on the game at the same time. It's tough.
It doesn't hold up well in the setting.
Yeah.
The setting...
And he basically gets all his hopes crushed. And that's one thing I do enjoy, because if you look at generic protags in general, they always win, I guess. You know, at some point they get what they want, but if you look at Rean, he's just... getting crushed more and more and more. You know what I mean? Like he becomes miserable as the games happen. Like one game after another, he's more miserable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one thing I do enjoy about it. But I understand why you dislike him. I think he's fine, but he won't be remembered as a, you know, amazing protag. That's for sure.
The way I see it now is I don't think he's a compelling character, but I think he's a compelling character study.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I agree. Also, I guess, you know...
As I say that, the thing about him being a compelling character study, at least from what I'm reading on my anime list, he becomes a more compelling character because he starts out as stereotypical and then is forced to grind that stereotype against a world where the stereotypes meet reality.
Yep, exactly. You can put it into words way better than I can. So that's basically what I think.
Again, this is what someone presented to me.
But I agree. I actually agree.
In a thread.
That's one thing.
And it just kind of made me realize that.
Yeah, and that's one thing I always thought about him, but could never really, you know, explain really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I don't know how much you know about Century, but since I know everything, you can just tell me anything. You won't spoil
I know that I know from a screenshot he goes full edge at least by the end of it.
Yeah, full edge, but a bit too much, and that's a shame because even the other characters are disappointed in his lack of control. Like even, you know, Crow says that he has a lot to learn. Because, well, he does. Yeah. So. And, yeah, it's pure misery at the end.
See, I'm honestly liking him, at least as he's described to me. I'm liking him, well, even in the context of Sen 2, I'm even liking him more in Sen 2 in the context of this argument.
Yeah.
Because if I thought about this argument throughout Sen 2, again, when I was playing Sen 1 and Sen 2, he was grating on me because of how stereotypical he was. But then when I think about all of the events, Rean constantly fails. He constantly fails. Even in Sen 1 and 2, he's constantly failing. Him in Class 7, but he's the one leading. Yeah. He's constantly failing. He's constantly needing to rely on the help of his friends or people more experienced. Everything is outside of his control.
Yeah.
There's nothing he can really do as much as he wants to. He would not have been able to save Thors if not for the aid of Olivier, who, again, he's an adult. He's much more experienced.
He's been through way more than Rean, that's for sure.
He's been through more.
You have to remember that Falcom is actually clever with this stuff, and they can take something boring and make it interesting, I think.
So I've realized how at least from this lens, how great Rean is.
Yeah.
And it can only go up from there because he's a deconstruction.
Uh-huh.
When you deconstruct a character like that, you can only build up after that.
Yep. Exactly. Oh, you know what's funny? I don't know if you saw the tweets, but I was watching the stream of Dengeki about Sen 4 with, they showed some scenes and Kondo talking about it. And in his office, he was proudly displaying the Nisa East 8 box.
Oh!
and I was just laughing because you had like his nice collection of stuff, and you could see like the big white East 8 box. I don't know, I just found it funny.
I will say this about NIS America.
They make great limited editions.
On a technical level, I do not like NIS America on a technical level.
Yeah.
A lot of the times there are several records of their games being buggy messes or changing things for the sake of quote-unquote flavor.
Yeah.
But, at this point, I've seen XC do that with I've seen XC do that with Trails in the Sky.
You wouldn't believe what they did with Cold Steel as well.
I would believe it, seeing as how, again, already 3 characters' names changed.
Yeah.
But again, they're only NPCs, but that's still some stuff that they're messing with.
Also, the fact that they removed as many references to the Crossbell arc as they could in Cold Steel too, so that people wouldn't be lost, which is a huge mistake because now there's going to be Sentry and 4, which heavily rely on Crossbell. So we're fucked because we need Crossbell, and Exceed is still not doing anything about it. Yay. Sorry, but that's a big problem.
Yes, I really do not like NIS America on a technical level, but at least for the most part, they tend to have with East 8, they knew not to mess with it.
Yeah.
With the localization. So they kept it as literal as possible, even if it was to the detriment of the script.
I actually prefer it over the other way.
I
honestly, that's just my taste.
I prefer literal. Actually, I talked about this in my Shining Resonance Refrain Let's Play, where I said back when I was not learning Japanese, I would not mind these changes, but now I prefer a more literal translation because 1, I'm learning Japanese, and 2, because when you're learning a language, and this goes along with me learning Japanese, when you're learning a language, you need to learn the context of the words. And I know we've already talked about this.
Yeah, we did, but yeah.
Where you need to know the context of the words like you would an actual language when you were speaking to people.
Yeah.
So I prefer these literal translations because even if they do sound awkward, they force me as the viewer or the player or the listener or whatever to pay attention to the context of the scene and therefore gain a deeper understanding of what's going on as a result.
Yeah.
Or at least make myself gain a deeper understanding, not just blindly read it. I actually have to know what's going on.
You know, one thing I will say is, I know Nisa has a lot of problems, but I think it's going too far when it comes to the Exceed fans' reactions. You can see that it's just a hatred boner, as opposed to, constructive things to say. And I will say this, with my experience with Trails in the Sky when it came out, and the huge LSD trip that was the opening, and the crashes that I had with it at first, and it took weeks to Exceed to fix it, and I wasn't angry at them, like things happen, but I will say I wish people would be a little bit more, what do you call it?
Would be less hypocritical?
Yeah, because sure, Nisa has a lot of issues, and I give them shit, trust me, and you know it. I actually contacted them about, DLC issues, if you remember, and how they kind of ignored me, but not at the same time, by saying, yeah, we'll fix it in 2 weeks, but never fixed it, whatever. And I give them shit, and I give shit, as we said many times, we say it when something is wrong, no matter the company. And I just wish people would be a little bit more, not neutral, but, objective.
A little bit more, subjective.
So, that's all I have to say, but clearly, Kondo is very happy with what happened with E8, with Nisa. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. So when people say, oh, never work with Nisa over again, I wouldn't really, Kondo will choose anyone if it means he gets what he wants, which makes sense. Even for Axie's games with Tokyo Xanadu.
Honestly, I liked how Tokyo Xanadu had Japanese dubs, because it made the translation a lot bearable.
And they respected French. I know they had to change the font, but they fucking respected the language instead of doing shit without looking it up. Literally, Google Translate does a better job than Exceed at French, and it's French that Exceed decided to add that was not there in the Japanese version. And I think it's quite insulting, to be honest. I'm sorry, but yeah. And they never corrected it. So before anyone, says, I just think it's not acceptable. So. And then they say they have experts about languages or whatever. I don't know. Talk about experts.
Yes, Viscount. That's it. Was pronounced. You found one movie where the word Viscount was pronounced Viscount. That completely legitimizes the way it's pronounced in the game.
So, all I say is I've seen Exceed being a little bit snarky when E3 was there, and they were actually mocking other localization companies about how they were so much better, I guess. And honestly, I would look at my track record before saying something like that, because that's really not appropriate. I'm sorry, but that's true. So, even if I sound like a hater, people that hate what I'm saying, deal with it. That's just how it is. I respect Exceed. They did a lot of good, but they did bad as well. So.
The same thing with me. I like the games, at least until recently, that Exceed was bringing over.
And now it's kind of.
And I find their localizations to be fairly good.
Yeah.
Especially if you compare what we got during the PlayStation 1 days.
Yeah, but at least good in an Native American perspective.
Yeah, in a Burgerlandian sense.
Yeah.
So, at least we're not getting At least we're not getting, does Rean have to choke a bitch? At least we're not getting that. But,
yeah.
for Burgerland standards, they have a higher standard when it comes to the localization. But they don't have we can't get Japanese dubs because of contracts. No, we can't pay for the contracts. It'd be too expensive.
But then
no,
they pay. But then they pay like for 5,000 extra voice lines in English.
We can't do dub only and not spend money on an English dub because then we'd be losing our Burgerland audience.
Yeah, because we Europeans don't matter to them. That's one thing I really noticed is they don't give a shit. We can say anything we want. They won't correct the mistakes they make. When French people complain, they don't care. When we talk about how, I wish I could buy on your store, well, deal with it, we don't ship outside the US. Whatever. It's just, I don't like their attitude towards that thing. I don't know. Their games are being localized, distributed in Europe, so they should actually care, because people see it.
The way I see it, the only way you can win is just buy the game in Japanese.
Yeah, that's what I do now. In fact, we talked about it with a few friends. We decided that we will, if we get stuff in English, we will get it because it's always more comfortable for us. But the main thing will be now playing in Japanese and completely discarding the rest. We don't care. Like, we just get the best of the experience, I guess. The best experience by doing that. And there's enough tools nowadays with the knowledge we have to actually play the games. So there is really no reason to rely on waiting years for an English localization. Even for you, like, you definitely have the level to do this. Trust me, you do.
But actually, and if that's not available, if you can't learn Japanese, you know how a lot of games are coming to the Southeast Asia territory now?
Yeah, with English translations, yeah.
Again, they use fairly literal translations.
Yeah.
So there's no changing of the lore. There's no egregious, unnecessary changes. They keep the Japanese dub, and again, it's in English because in the Southeast Asia territory, English is kind of a unified language around there. So English is just the easiest thing. And honestly, I've spoken to at least the PR people. I've spoken to some of the PR people that work on some of these games, and they're all really cool people. Or P-Cube. P-Cube is really cool.
Yeah.
But they're a European company, so that should be a given.
But
they're based, UK company.
Yeah, UK.
So yeah, that should be a given. The best case scenario is that it's not Xseed, Axis, or NIS America, it's the Southeast Asia localization companies.
I know Sen 1 and 2, and in fact the entire Sen arc is gonna be released in Chinese regions, but no word on an English translation, unfortunately, so...
I honestly doubt it.
Yeah, no, it's been confirmed.
A man can
it's been confirmed that by Play Asia, that it won't have a English translation. Unless they do one later, who knows, but I'm just hoping we do get them translated. Even if I can play them in Japanese now, and it's still nice, so we will see. We need the PS4 versions in the West.
One thing I will say is, again, I play a filthy mobile game called Grand Blue Fantasy. What they did is, they did not make a separate server, they did not make a separate version of the game for the US or Europe or English. They just slapped on English onto the game.
Yeah.
And now a bunch of people are playing that game.
Exactly, yeah. So I think...
it makes me wonder, it makes me think, why don't more Japanese game companies do that at least when they know they have an audience in the West? Because I think it would save them money, it would save them production costs. They just have to patch it in. A little post-recording correction because I am an idiot that is unable to articulate ideas in real time. When I said save resources, what I meant by that is hiring a more local company rather than contracting out to a foreign company, because that may help save time and money. May. Not necessarily.
Oh yeah, you know another solution I thought about. Maybe I'm just way too naive, but that I wish Falcom, since Falcom now has, I believe, I mean, 1/3 of the profit comes from the West, so that's a huge number actually, believe it or not. So one thing I'm hoping to see one day is perhaps Falcom would open a Western.
Western studio,
Branch?
like Arc System Works did.
Yeah, or IFI, you know?
Yes.
Something like that. Like, that is something I would love to see, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's one thing. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this little episode about Rean and localizations. Well, thoughts about localization from a European perspective at least.